and welcome to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Sierra.
And I'm Grace.
Today is another of our Recess Digest episodes where we aim to bring you some helpful insights and new tips and strategies in the time it takes for you to eat your recess. As always, we are accompanied with warm beverages and hope that they are still warm by the time that we finish.
Our Recess Digest series has so far been an exploration of the habits of mind, and we're going to be continuing that today. Speaking of the habits of mind, you may have noticed on our Instagram that we have a new stamp collection, and one of those stamps is a habits of mind stamp. And when we were approached and asked if we wanted to design some stamps, this was one that I quite quickly thought of because, as I say all the time on our show, the habits of mind are something that my school tries to integrate into every facet of our students' experiences. And with my little people in kindergarten, I thought it might be a bit helpful to have a visual kind of as a form of self-reflection or a bit of feedback at the end of a lesson if we've written or produced some kind of tangible piece of work where I can chuck that stamp on and probably me, because my handwriting is smaller and more legible, I can quickly write in the habit of mind there that we have discussed. And it's also a bit of a prompt to me to actually talk about the habits of mind more because currently we have two that we're focusing on that I printed out and stuck on the side of our smartboard, and I haven't talked about them in probably 2 weeks. So good on me, even with a visual reminder. I will not remember. But there is always hope for the future. And today, the two habits of mind we will be discussing are creating, imagining, and innovating, and responding with wonderment and awe. So let's get into it.
Let's. I would love to start with creating, imagining, and innovating. I feel like this is really on my mind at the moment because I have been just deliberating and debating for ages about how on earth do I help my students, in particular high schoolers, who seem to have reached this point in their, I guess, childhood, adolescent development trajectory where they just kind of believe that they're either creative or not. And in a creative subject, that's really challenging to try and inspire and get them thinking outside the box. I've been working really hard to try and think about how do I establish a set of projects, especially through year 7 and 8, so technology mandatory. During those year 7 and 8 years, there's such a fine balance to strike between I have all these students walking through my door who don't have the practical skills or the knowledge about manufacturing and materials to be able to really be creative in what they're producing. You know what I mean? Like they don't actually have the foundational knowledge to know that, oh, I could take this tool or I could take this material and I can do something really cool with it. So there has to be a balance between running very structured projects that expose them to those skills and machines and materials that then give them the foundations that they need to then take that and go and be creative. But what I'm finding is that as my students are progressing through the older years, I'm not really seeing that take it and be creative part. They're just very used to being told, we're going to make this, and they just want to know the instructions, and they are not comfortable with me kind of saying, well, that's your decision. You need to come up with a creative solution for that or whatever. So this has really been on my mind lately, and I'm trying this new thing with year 8. I'm actually so excited, and I teach 3 year 8 classes, and normally when I see year 8 pop up on my timetable, I'm a little bit like, oh, okay, let's do some starfish breathing. But honestly, the last 2 weeks, I have been excited when I see year 8 come up on my timetable. Yay. And I'm walking to my year 8 classroom. In conjunction with my colleague who also teaches the other year 8 classes, we've developed a project matrix for this unit. So instead of saying, hey, everybody, we're all making bee hotels, which is what we did last year for this unit, I've come up with a matrix of 4 different design projects that are kind of like a bit smaller scale where they have to choose 2 projects from the matrix to design and develop themselves. And the uptake has just been so fantastic. Like, I could not have asked for a better response from my classes.
Yay.
Just in terms of like, yeah, I am not trying to drag any of them along through this initial designing phase, except that what often happens is they kind of just draw a dodgy picture and then just say, hey, miss, I'm going to make this. Or they draw a fantastic picture and they say, hey, miss, is this okay to make? And what I'm finding really interesting is that I have to say to them, well, that's a really cool drawing, but do you know how you would make that? And they kind of look at me and they're a little bit confused. And so I'm seeing how they're lacking the foundational skills to make design decisions. And they also just have a tendency to kind of go, well, this is what I want to do, without really thinking creatively about the materials in front of them or what they can do with it. So I've been harping on about it to them over the last couple of weeks about like they need to try and draw as many different designs as they can. And this idea that I remember my teacher telling me your first idea is not your best idea, and that kind of being a little bit offensive.
Yeah.
And I know that my kids will be offended if I sort of say to them, that's not good enough. And so I'm trying to get them to see, I'm not saying that your idea is a bad idea, but it's not the best idea you could come up with. And it seems like so many of them just kind of hit this roadblock and they're just like, well, miss, I'm not creative, or I'm not a good drawer. So all I can give you is a cube. I'm sorry. You know? And then there's others who will just spend so long drawing these intricate, detailed pictures. And it's like, come on, it's time to actually start trial and error and experimenting, because you're actually not going to get it perfect on the paper until you try something in real life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm really working hard to try and help my students see that it's not that they are creative or they aren't. And I acknowledge that some of them will feel more creative or that this will come more naturally to others than them, but you know that there are practices that we can implement to boost our creativity. And so we've been doing things like we played like some Mr. Squiggle the other day. And just as a bit of an example, but then getting them to actually buddy up with someone in the classroom. And so you draw something and then swap with your buddy and have your buddy add something to your design sketch to maybe try and help prompt some thinking. And I don't know, that's what I've been doing to try and help get them actually going beyond just their first idea. But it's risky for them and they don't like acknowledging that their idea might not be good enough. And I think that's part of the barrier that stops them from ideating.
Yeah. What I find fascinating is that as you were talking, it just occurred to me that we can think of so many other things as, you know, developable or workable, but creativity is so often it's, you know, it comes naturally to you. You're either creative or you're not. And you can have a growth mindset, quote unquote, in every other way, but a very fixed mindset about creativity. But it is something that you actually do need to invest a lot of time in being creative. And it's, like you said, trial and error and going beyond just the immediate easy fix, because when you're being creative and you're imagining and innovating, you're not really trying to be efficient in the creative process. You might be trying to create a more efficient way of doing something, but the idea is that, you know, things exist already because everyone's thought of them. Like your first idea is probably something that already exists. And to be creative, it actually requires effort and trial and error and working things out. It's problem solving. And I was just perusing the Habits of Mind website, and I just found this paragraph that really resonated, I think, with our show, because you'll see in a minute. But I'll just read it. It's not too many sentences. Everything is new and wondrous for young children. Kids have imaginary friends, create cities with their blocks, pretend they are superheroes. However, as students get older, they become more concerned with being correct or being judged for their ideas. They often start to question their capacity to create, imagine, and innovate. And I noticed that, like, literally right there, they create cities with their blocks. Whenever I put Lego out or any blocks of any kind, so many things are being created, and the students are always so happy to show me. They're like, Miss Keane, can you take a photo so you can put it on Seesaw and show my parents? And they aren't worried about how it's going to be perceived. They are just so proud to show me, because to them it's this brand new concept because they haven't experienced so much of the world. And yeah, it's all exciting and they're full of energy and enthusiasm. But yeah, as we get older, and obviously, Sarah, you can speak more to this, but, you know, just from me being a human in the world, like being a teenager is so much like, what is everyone thinking about me? And a lot of our academic culture, whether we intend it or not, and we've talked about this so much on other episodes, is about being correct. You know, there's a test you got to take, or there's a mark you have to achieve, or whatever. And so we're being trained just kind of generally in society to worry about doing it the right way. And if you're going to create, imagine, or innovate, you're going to mess things up or do things that don't work. And that is really scary, like you said, like taking a risk in a classroom where, you know, you feel like, oh, I'm learning, but I need to be doing everything right. So, you know, my teacher will say, that's awesome, like, great job. Like, it's scary and stressful.
It's such a real struggle, that observation for me. It's like, I wish that my students had small human inspiration. But yeah, I think the big takeaway from this is to engage our students in understanding that their capacity for creativity can actually be developed. And so, like we said, risk-taking is really important. And so trying to, you know, firstly, we know that we have to establish a positive error climate, and we need to have like our students comfortable with making mistakes in our classroom. And that's just something that's going to benefit their learning generally. But one of the other strategies that's recommended for sort of boosting creativity is brainstorming unexpected ideas. And I really love this recommendation. And there's a particular thinking routine, options explosion, that goes super well with this. If you're looking to give students structured ways to be creative, and I think certainly for my students, they thrive off that. You start with an idea. So for example, if I use my B hotel idea that I've been working on with Year 8, you start by just listing the obvious options. So, and I mean, this could be for designing and creating, but it could be for anything, really, anything where you're trying to get students to have some sort of original or imaginative idea. So you put the idea in the middle of the board, and as a class, you could brainstorm the sort of most obvious options that come to mind. For example, hexagons are a big theme when you're talking about bee-related things because of, you know, honeycomb and all of that. And so it's like such an obvious shape option for like all of their designs. So we'll chuck that on there. Yellows and blacks, chuck that on there. Any sort of other really obvious option, we put it on the board. And, you know, the first time I did this, I didn't actually tell them what I was doing. So I was like, let's go. What options can we think of? And they're all spitting all these ideas out of me. And I was like, great, now you can't use any of them.
And they're like, what? I feel duped.
So the idea is that once you have listed the most obvious options around the center of the idea, that you then are challenging your students to search for the hidden options, which are really the best choices that they could make. And this is where they start branching into that kind of imaginative side of their thinking, and allows them to piggyback on new ideas and combine different ideas to come up with even more new ideas. And it's just a really helpful process to help them, think about coming up with something original and unique.
And they need to sit in that kind of struggle area for probably a lot longer than feels comfortable, and probably think, am I even being creative? Like, it's taking so much effort to come up with these ideas, but we're not accustomed to thinking like this normally. Like, if I need to find out something or know a way to do something, I Google it, and then I have the answer right in front of me, and I don't need to go beyond a surface level, like the AI summary that comes up at the top now. Like, I don't need to go beyond that. And so you need to, I love it. What a time to be alive. That ties in really nicely with our next habit of mind, which is responding with wonderment and awe. And I love that wonderment is a word.
I was
think it's
thinking
delightful.
exactly the same thing this afternoon. I'm not sure I've ever heard it in any other context.
Yes, this was the first time when I was introduced to the habits of mind. It was the first time I ever heard the word wonderment, and I was like, surely that's not correct.
It is actually in the dictionary.
It is actually in the dictionary.
A state of awed admiration.
Awed admiration.
Yeah.
And teaching small humans, they are so excited by everything because, again, they just haven't experienced a lot of stuff. And so I get the privilege of seeing them experience things for the first time a lot of the time, which is awesome, and just blowing their minds. I feel like this is probably the habit of mine that comes most naturally to me. And being around small children also really helps me to kind of notice my own cynicism. But like, life is wonderful, and seeing it through a child's eyes is just, really inspiring, which, that's why I love teaching the younger years also, because I get to introduce them to stuff and they come to me so excited about something that I think is super mundane, and I am then prompted to go, actually, no, that is really exciting. And I think this kind of thing, because the habits of mind are dispositions that you need to become an agile learner, a productive human, just kind of a well-rounded thinking individual, and being appreciative and interested in the world around you is helpful, because if you're not responding with wonderment and awe, you're probably not going to be curious. You're probably not going to care about being creative. You're not going to care about questioning and posing problems. Caring about what you see enough to be in a state of awed wonder.
Yeah. Or even awe and wonder at how horrific something is. Like, I know that the way that this is coming at this habit of mind does focus a little bit on how our emotions are attached to like a sense of amazement and fascination. And so like when we learn to sort of tap into that, we make our learning more enjoyable and exciting. But even when I think about, for example, from a design and technology perspective, I want my HSC students to be looking at the world and think, wow, that is just something that needs improving, or something that needs refining, or I could innovate in that space because the way that is just hurtful or wrong or not effective or not efficient or unsustainable or whatever, and to almost have an extreme sense of awe and amazement that then drives change.
Yeah, to feel strongly enough about something that you want to take action.
Yeah. So, and sometimes sometimes it's a feel good emotion, and sometimes it's a driving emotion. But I think trying to build this into our students is so important, especially, and I think it ties in really well with the other habit of mine we were talking about, and creativity and innovating, and how can we expect them to know where to look for sources of inspiration if they're not inspired or wowed by anything around them.
Yeah. Last year, at the end of the year in our staff meetings, we were challenged with creating a lesson that was specifically designed to teach a habit of mind. And two of the teachers in the English faculty focused on wonderment and awe, because they found that their 14-year-old students were just so blasé about everything, and they weren't emoting really in class at all. And so they, the teachers provided them with some kind of inspirational biographies, I think, of a variety of different people, different famous people from like sporting and art and whatever, and did some, thinking routines and exercises with them about these, amazing things that these people had done, and actually elicited quite an encouraging response from these students. And that just made me go, oh, yeah, you actually, just like you can teach creativity or develop creativity, you can train yourself to be aware of things that you can respond to with awe. being mindful and having gratitude and that kind of thing. You might practice writing down 3 things you're grateful for or whatever, which then makes you more aware of them, which makes you more grateful. It's kind of a similar thing. Yeah.
And what we really want to do at the end of the day is associate learning with those feel-good emotions and those feel-good sort of neurotransmitters like dopamine and endorphins and things like that are actually going to associate what they're learning with something exciting and then therefore build their motivation to keep learning it. And yeah, I know that we all would say that we feel restricted and that the syllabus, has to give us some direction and that at the end of the day, we can't please everyone and all of their interests. But where we can, giving our students an opportunity or creating a task that gives space for creativity and individual exploration in personal interests, like, we have to look at biographies. Let's choose biographies about really amazing people from a whole range of contexts that our students can choose for which one or two grabs their motivation, or which design project or two grabs their motivation. I have had students this week learning how to do CAD modeling on a software that I'm only a few steps ahead of them in, but that for so long we were kind of writing off as just too hard for our juniors. And I am sitting with kids who are now zooming through it almost faster than I can keep up and creating and exploring that. And they are taking risks in a new project because they're like, wow, this look at what this can do. Like, and that sense of awe in what they're doing is then motivating them to pursue their learning in a passionate and excited way.
And then to persist when the learning isn't super exciting.
That's right.
Because they know it is possible that it will be exciting.
Or when it's hard and they're just totally stumped and they're like, I don't know what to do next, but I'm so invested in this now that I've got to persist with it. And then persisting is another habit of mind, and they all come together and it's all intertwined.
No.
So yeah, I think that we have to look for processes and procedures that we can give our students, like particular thinking routines that are going to give them a guide for how to explore creative things, and to just look for ways that we can actually spark their wonder and interest.
And that brings us to the end of our Recess Digest. I hope you are enjoying a still hot beverage wherever you are. Thank you for listening. And you can find us on all of the socials. And on those socials, you will also find some links to our stamps through our collaboration with Lily Jane Collective. And there is a special discount code that you will find if you go searching on our Instagram for the store, which is it's just very exciting. Like, these stamps exist. Like, they're in my classroom right now and I've used them and it's just very exciting. We will catch you next time on our next episode.
Bye.